Most people are told the same lie so early and so often that by the time they are old enough to measure its cost, they have already built half a life inside it. Go to school, get good grades, listen carefully, do not question too much. Find a stable job, work hard, be patient, be reliable, stay out of trouble, save a little, retire one day. That sounds responsible. It also sounds like a program designed by someone who needs obedient workers more than it needs wealthy citizens. That is the first thing I want you to understand. I am not saying discipline is useless. I am not saying work is meaningless. I am saying the rules most people are given were not written to make them rich. They were written to make them usable. That is different. A usable person is punctual, polite, predictable, teachable, afraid of authority, grateful for permission, comfortable waiting, comfortable being measured, comfortable being told that one day, if they keep doing what they are told, life will finally reward them. A rich person, or at least a person moving toward real wealth, usually learns a different game. He learns to question the path. He learns that institutions say one thing in public and reward another in practice. He learns that credentials without convertibility are expensive paper. He learns that risk is not avoided by obeying rules, only disguised. He learns that rules are not sacred. They are instruments. Some protect you, some cage you, some delay you just long enough for somebody else to own what you could have owned. That is the mother line for everything I am about to say. Becoming rich usually requires breaking the rules that were designed to make you a reliable participant in somebody else's machine and replacing them with a different set of rules built around ownership, leverage, negotiation, and strategic exposure to luck. That is the line. Read it again. Because once you understand that, you stop asking the wrong question. You stop asking, how do I become more obedient, more approved, more employable, more respectable inside the existing track? You start asking, which track was built for me? Who does it enrich? Which parts of it are useful? And when does obedience stop being virtue and start becoming self-erasure? That is the adult question. That is the useful question. Most people never ask it. They are too busy trying to become excellent prisoners of a system that calls them disciplined each time they decorate the bars. I learned a long time ago that there are two forms of poverty. The first is obvious, no money, no buffer, no options. The second is more dangerous because it hides behind achievement. A good arfe sum fe, a neat apartment, a decent salary, a respectable title, a clean LinkedIn profile, a growing sense that you are doing everything correctly and still somehow moving too slowly for the amount of effort being spent. That second form of poverty is harder to detect because the outside still looks fine. But inside, the machine is already telling the truth. You do not own enough. You do not control enough. You cannot say no enough. You cannot survive a big deviation from the path you were told to follow. That is not wealth. That is dependency with better branding. And dependency is exactly what the conventional rules are built to produce. Now let me show you the first mechanism. I call it the worker script. The worker script is the collection of habits, values, and institutional expectations that create someone who can be supervised, evaluated, scheduled, and replaced without too much resistance. It begins in school. That is not an accident. School teaches some useful things, yes. But look closely at what it rewards most consistently. Sit still, memorize, repeat. Do the assignment the way it was described. Do not ask too many inconvenient questions. Do not challenge the grading framework. Do not disrupt the room, perform the task, receive the signal, move forward. That creates a certain type of person. Again, not a worthless person, a useful person, a person who can survive and maybe even perform well inside an institution already built by someone else. That is the worker script. And if your ambition is to become an elite employee inside a stable machine, parts of the script are perfectly rational. The problem begins when people confuse employability with ownership. They are not the same thing. A worker gets paid when the owner says yes. An owner gets paid when the system keeps functioning around assets, claims, relationships, and leverage he controls. A worker can be valuable and still fragile. An owner can be invisible and still powerful. That is the difference. A lot of talented people never become wealthy because they spend their best years getting better and better at creating value inside structures they do not own. That is not a moral failure. It is a positioning failure. The worker script trains you to seek certainty, approval, and sequence. Real wealth often requires the opposite at the beginning: a tolerance for uncertainty, a willingness to be misunderstood, a preference for asymmetry over approval, a refusal to confuse the path praised by institutions with the path that compounds ownership. This is why I say the rules are not neutral. They are not simply wise customs floating in the air. They are incentives and filters. And the worker script is one of the most powerful filters ever built, because it makes people feel honorable while they are becoming dependent. That is very elegant social engineering. Now let me say something harder. The worker path is not only low leverage, it is usually delayed leverage. You get paid after the hours, after the quarter, after the review cycle, after the promotion committee, after the company decides the budget, after the market decides the layoffs. Your income remains a derivative of approval for much longer than most people want to admit. Meanwhile, the people who own shares, distribution channels, customer lists, rent, producing assets, intellectual property, or scalable systems do not live on that same clock. Their clock is different, their leverage is different, their dependency is different. That is why the worker script can make a person respectable and still leave him structurally behind. Now let me move to the second mechanism. I call it the negotiation world. Poor and middle. Income people are often trained to treat authority as fixed. Rich people are often trained to treat authority as a conversation. That difference changes everything. A child who grows up hearing, "Do not talk back, do not question, do what you are told, keep your head down," enters adulthood with one relationship to power. A child who grows up hearing, "Ask why, make your case, negotiate, appeal, push, reframe, ask again," enters adulthood with another. Those two children do not merely sound different in meetings. They enter an entirely different economy. One asks for permission. The other tests boundaries. One assumes rules are walls. The other assumes rules are starting positions. One thinks authority is dangerous. The other thinks authority is influenceable. That is not a small cultural variation. That is a wealth difference in embryo. Because wealth is not only built by making good decisions in private, it is built by negotiating terms in public: compensation, equity, partnerships, contracts, introductions, board seats, debt terms, purchase prices, exit packages, tax structures. None of those are awarded by people who remain psychologically trapped in the command world. You do not negotiate brilliantly if your nervous system still thinks every conversation with power is a disciplinary meeting. That is why environment matters more than motivation posters. A person raised inside the negotiation world learns that a conversation can change the rule. A person raised outside it often learns to obey the rule first and question it later, if ever. Now, here is the cruelty. The same institutions that reward confidence and negotiation later often punished questioning earlier, when the poor child tried it in the wrong room. So by the time adulthood arrives, the rich are fluent in strategic friction, and the poor are often fluent in strategic compliance. Then the labor market, the legal market, and the capital market reward the first skill and underpay the second. That is how inequality gets laundered into personality judgment. People say one person has leadership, the other lacks initiative. Sometimes what they are really observing is differential childhood permission. That matters a lot. Because if you want to get rich, you eventually have to move from the obedience economy to the negotiation economy. Even if you begin as an employee, you cannot remain psychologically organized around instructions forever. At some point, you must ask for more, structure more, refuse more, propose more, and own more. That shift is one of the hardest in adult life because it requires rejecting the social reward of being easy to manage. The world loves manageable people. They are profitable. The world pays differently for people who can renegotiate the frame. Now let me move to the third mechanism. I call it the credential trap. This one destroys a lot of intelligent people because it offers them a clean moral bargain. Study hard now and the world will reward you later. Again, partly true. Dangerously incomplete. Credentials can matter. Some professions require them. Some gates are real. I am not here to pretend medicine, law, engineering, or other technical fields can simply be hacked through vibes and self-belief. That would be foolish. But the public was sold a broader story than that. They were sold the idea that a credential is a universal converter. Get enough grades, enough certificates, enough prestige signals, and the machine will finally open. For some people, it does. For others, it opens only halfway. Why? Because the credential is often not the whole asset. The hidden asset is social convertibility. Who can turn your credential into an opportunity? Who introduces you? Who vouches for you? Who assumes you belong in the room before you speak? Who interprets your mistakes as rough edges instead of deep character flaws? Who lets you fail once without falling through the floor? That is what the credential trap hides. Two people can carry the same degree and live in completely different markets, because one of them also carries embedded trust, better networks, more cultural fluency, and more downside protection. That is why I always tell people to distinguish between paper value and conversion value. Paper value says what you earned. Conversion value says what the world lets that thing become. A poor student can earn the paper. A connected student often gets the conversion too. Those are not the same. And if you do not understand that, you will keep making one of the most expensive mistakes in modern borrowing heavily for paper while assuming paper automatically behaves like access. Sometimes it does, often it does not. This is why a lot of highly educated people remain financially anxious deep into adulthood. They bought credentials. They did not buy ownership. They bought status signals. They did not buy leverage. They bought legitimacy. They did not buy escape velocity. Those are different purchases. Again, I am not saying education is worthless. I am saying a credential is only rich when it lives inside a broader structure that can convert it into income, equity, influence, or option value. Without that structure, the credential can become an expensive delay. Now let me say something even harder. A lot of people remain trapped because credentials flatter a particular kind of ego. They let you feel intelligent without forcing you to ask whether the game you are winning is actually the game that pays. That is dangerous. Very dangerous. You can become world class at passing through filters built by other people and still never build anything you control. That is why I call it a trap. The credential is not always the problem. The assumption that it will be enough is the problem. Now, let me move to the fourth mechanism. I call it the risk cushion. This is one of the deepest secrets in all visible success. People celebrate boldness. They almost never audit recoverability. That is the real divider. A rich family does not only give a child money, it gives that child failed experiment capacity, try the startup, move to the city, take the low-paying apprenticeship at the good firm, launch the project. Spend 6 months networking, quit the bad job, study the niche, write the book, build the product. That freedom is not only a psychological luxury, it is an economic weapon. The person with a cushion can take strategic risks, because failure is painful but survivable. The person without a cushion must price failure differently. One bad move can mean rent trouble, debt trouble, food trouble, family trouble, reputation trouble. Years of recovery. That is not the same game, not even close. This is why telling poor and middle income people to just take more risks is often lazy advice dressed up as wisdom. Risk is not a philosophy problem first. It is a balance sheet problem. If you have no reserve, high fixed obligations, family dependence, no network, and no safety net, then what the rich call courage may function as self-destruction for you. That does not mean you should never take risk. It means the first form of strategic rebellion may be building enough cushion that you can afford nonconformity later. That is a very different message from the reckless romance that gets marketed online. The internet loves the entrepreneur who bet everything. The internet rarely interviews the 100 quieter people who built their runway first, and therefore survived long enough for luck to matter. I respect the second group much more, because they understand a hard truth: there is no wealth without some form of risk. There is also no durable wealth without risk management. The poor are usually trained to avoid risk entirely. The rich are usually trained to structure it. That is the gap. And if you want to get richer, one of the first things you must do is stop asking how to eliminate risk and start asking which risks are asymmetric, survivable, and attached to better games than the one you are in now. That is adult ambition, not wildness, not caution. Structure. Now let me move to the fifth mechanism. I call it the permission trap. This one is subtle and devastating because it hides inside politeness. Most people lose years waiting to feel authorized. Authorized to start, authorized to ask, authorized to sell, authorized to charge more, authorized to move cities, authorized to speak publicly, authorized to launch the thing before it looks perfect, authorized to call the person above them, authorized to ask for equity instead of salary, authorized to renegotiate the terms, authorized to stop being the reliable one in the room. That waiting feels mature. It is often just dependency turned inward. A lot of rich people learn early that permission is negotiated, borrowed, manufactured, or ignored. That can go wrong. Of course, still, it creates an entirely different tempo of life. The permission seeker arrives after the opportunity has been sterilized into safety. The permission breaker arrives early enough to matter. Now let me be precise. I am not telling you to become criminal. I am not telling you to be reckless for sport. I am telling you that many of the rules most people obey are social rules, not sacred laws. Do not be too visible. Do not sell too confidently. Do not stand out too much. Do not ask for too much. Do not leave the stable path. Do not break your community's script. Do not take the bigger swing. Do not claim expertise too early. Do not market yourself too hard. Do not look ambitious. Do not make people uncomfortable. If you follow all of that, you will become easy to like and hard to enrich. That is the permission trap. A great many fortunes began when someone decided that social approval was not worth more than strategic position. Not because the person was evil, because the person understood that polite delay is one of the most effective wealth suppression tools ever invented. Now, let me say something harsher. The system teaches rule, following partly because a society of constant rule, testers would be noisy, unstable, and harder to govern. Fine, that is understandable. But if you internalize that teaching too deeply, you end up optimizing for social comfort in environments where wealth goes to the people willing to make stronger asks, take cleaner shots, move, and accept some level of disapproval. There is a line between civil behavior and self-censorship. A lot of people cross it without noticing, and once they do, they become invisible to opportunity. Now, let me move to the sixth mechanism. I call it the luck position. This is the most important mechanism of all if you want truth rather than theater. Luck matters. I believe that deeply where you are born matters. Who raises you matters. What country you live in matters. What city you choose matters. What room you enter matters. Who you spend your time with matters. Which industry you stand near matters. All of that is luck mixed with decision. And the highest form of practical intelligence is not denying luck. It is increasing exposure to the kinds of environments where luck can actually find you. That is strategy. A dead town can consume a talented person for decades. A weak industry can flatten a strong mind. A bad room can make a gifted person invisible. The reverse is also true. A better geography, a better market, a better peer set, a better company, a better city, a better circle of builders, operators, investors, sellers, creators. These can change the frequency with which good accidents become possible. That is what I mean by luck position. You cannot control luck directly. You can absolutely control whether you live in a place where there are more doors through which luck can enter. That is not fantasy. That is one of the oldest truths in success. A lot of people who escaped modest beginnings did not do it by becoming morally superior. They did it by moving. They left weak rooms for stronger rooms. They left local scripts for larger games. They accepted the risk of departure because staying promised a lower ceiling than leaving. That is not betrayal, that is strategy. And strategy matters because the environment is not neutral. It is not enough to improve yourself if the market around you cannot see, price, or reward the improvement. This is where a lot of hard-working people break their own hearts. They optimize themselves heroically inside environments that are not built to promote them. That effort is real. The payoff can still be weak, because effort without market fit is one of the saddest things in the world. It deserves respect. It often does not create wealth. That is why I keep coming back to game selection. Who is your effort being offered to, under what terms, in what geography, in what hierarchy, in what room? These questions matter more than most people admit because they challenge the comforting myth that any room will do if your character is pure enough. No, the room matters, the market matters, the game matters. Pick better games. Now let me move to the seventh mechanism. I call it the meritocracy mask. This is the story that keeps the whole machine calm. It tells the winners they deserved almost all of it. It tells the losers they deserve almost all of it too. That is very useful social technology, because if the rich must admit how much of their success came from trust, network timing, geography, family insulation, and luck exposure, they lose some of the intoxicating feeling that their victory proves total superiority. And if the poor must admit how much of their struggle came from structure, game design, and inherited disadvantage, they may stop blaming themselves and start questioning the hierarchy. The mask prevents both disruptions. It is elegant. It tells the rich they are self-made. It tells the poor they need more grit. It converts a structural game into a moral courtroom. And once life is interpreted that way, the hierarchy becomes easier to maintain. The winners feel righteous. The strugglers feel ashamed. Everyone keeps playing. That is the mask. Now I want to be clear. Effort matters. Discipline matters. Character matters. I am not denying any of that. I am denying the lie that they operate alone. They do not. And if you want to get richer, you must stop using moral language where structural language is more accurate. A person can work very hard and remain trapped. A person can work hard in a better room and compound. The effort may be similar. The structure is not. That is the lesson. Once you understand it, you stop asking, how do I become worthy enough for the current system to reward me? You start asking, which parts of the current system deserve my obedience? Which parts deserve strategic use? And which parts are simply wasting my life while calling it character development? That is a much better question. Now let me compress all of this into the three things that actually matter. If you want to get richer without lying to yourself, first, stop imitating the visible habits of successful people as if the habit itself were the engine. Waking up early, reading more books, practicing stoicism, posting thought leadership, sounding confident, even working hard. These can all help. They are not the hidden source of wealth by themselves. The real question is what game those habits are being applied inside. A good habit in a dead game still produces dead returns. That is the first thing. Second, move into games where success compounds. Better rooms, better markets, better geographies, better circles, better industries, better leverage, better access to networks that convert effort into opportunity, instead of merely praising effort for being effort. That build enough cushion that you can survive strategic disobedience, enough cash, low enough fixed obligations, enough room to move, enough flexibility to leave weak games, enough reserve that one failed attempt does not force you back into pure obedience for another 5 years. That is the third thing. See the game, change the game, build the cushion to stay in the better game long enough for luck to matter. That is much closer to the truth than the rules most people are handed in childhood. Now let me make the identity flip explicit. Most people think the goal is to become more admirable. I think that is a trap. The real goal is to become more strategically placed. A highly admirable person in the wrong room remains underpaid, overused, and eventually confused. A strategically placed person with decent discipline can create more wealth than a more admirable person trapped in a system that only knows how to extract labor. That is not a beautiful sentence. It is still true. Stop trying to become flawless inside a structure that was not designed to pay flawlessness fairly. Become better positioned instead. That is the flip. And once you make that shift, life changes. You stop asking for the world to certify your goodness before rewarding you. You start building the conditions under which reward becomes more likely. That is much colder. It is also much more. Now let me bring the operating system together in plain language. First, stop worshiping traits in isolation. Always ask what environment produced them and whether your environment rewards the same thing. Second, treat trust, networks, and safety nets as real economic assets, not as soft background details. Third, do not confuse credentials with convertibility. Stop thinking of risk as a philosophy problem. Treat it as a recoverability problem. Fifth, optimize for room quality and game quality, not only effort quantity. Sixth, reject any story of merit that prevents you from seeing structure clearly. Seventh, position your life so luck can find you repeatedly without one miss wiping you out. That is the operating system. Not resentment, not cynicism, clarity. Now let me put the blade into this as cleanly as I can. Becoming rich often requires breaking their rules, because their rules were designed to create reliable participants in a hierarchy, not wealthy escapees from it. That is the truth. And if you remember nothing else from what I said, remember this: most people are not poor because they refuse to work. They are poor because they worked inside a game that knew exactly how to consume effort, praise discipline, and still keep ownership, leverage, and luck concentrated elsewhere. See that clearly enough, and you stop copying the wrong people for the wrong reasons. See it early enough, and you still have time to change the rules that are changing you.